You see you're wearing the same shirt, and I can actually see it this time. It's not blurry. So that's the first thing I wanted to talk about, because, we tried to do this before, but it was tough with the connection, and we ended up just talking on the phone. And, half the time we were talking about what's on your shirt there. So, I mean, you want to just talk through, what being exothermic means to you, and how that just permeates through your whole culture. I thought that was just a very intriguing topic.
Yeah, I mean, so first, thanks for having me on, Jake. Good to talk again, and glad we can make this work out.
Yeah.
So let's talk big exothermic. So like in 20, what is it, three Modexes ago, right? So that's a while back. We decided we were going to go to Modex. We were just attending, and we wanted to put out something that really we felt embodied our company, and it was one of our cultural principles. So, and I'm a nerd, so I like science and math stuff, right? So like, and we thought about a phrase that would really embody who we believed was a good fit for SVT, but also who would represent themselves in a way that created products that would treat our customers the way we felt like customers should be treated. And be exothermic is what we came up with. And exothermic means to a chemical reaction that gives off more energy than you put in. And frankly, exothermic people are the best people to work with. They're the must-have inside of a smart, creative organization that's doing product development. They are people that when they're in the room or on the job, they are giving off more energy than they're putting in, or that you put in. And so like, these are not people that need to be pushed. These are people that are wanting to make things better just because that's how they think, right? And so exothermic people are the opposite is an energy vampire, right? So like an energy vampire is someone you're in the meeting, you're talking to them, they're sucking the soul out of everybody. At the end, everyone's running for a Snickers bar or a Red Bull to replenish their energy, because they just make things slower. And frankly, it doesn't necessarily mean somebody who's like super bubbly and skipping through meadows and has is all about butterflies and rainbows.
Right.
It could be the quietest guys in the room. It could be, we have one guy who's just a Jedi Knight, but he's a man of few words. The reality is the things that he does and the lift he creates for others without saying much, he's just one of the most exothermic people we have on our team, and he's amazing. And so you got to identify who these people are, because when you make that organization of exothermic people, you end up with a product that is exothermic. And exothermic products are products that give energy to people or create outcomes for them that they couldn't do with the energy they could put in themselves the hard way. So, and I believe that exothermic products are the products that change the world, right? So, and that's what we're striving for. So, and the journey's still new for us, and we believe that we've got something great, but in the meantime, the only way to make sure that happens is to constantly surround yourself with people that are exothermic. And if there's only one of our cultural principles that you follow, I think that would be the one.
Yeah, no, I love it. I think, it's very clear. I think in a very similar way, but mine is more, you dived in deep to the scientific side of things. I would have, used a more common term, because you're a lot smarter than I am. But no, we all know that, right? Like we all know that, but it's surprising how many companies and how many places allow the opposite to happen. And you feel it. Like you said, it doesn't have to be the person that skips into the room and you feel their presence.
Yeah.
You can do it with, very few words, and it's your actions, right? Yeah. And that was one of the things, that was a question that I had that you answered, was, do you have to be that guy or girl that walks in a room, and
No.
demands the presence. It's like, no, I mean, you can do so in so many different ways.
Yeah, I mean, these are people that give without taking, right? And it's just, you don't have to be, super charismatic to be that person, right? You can be super humble and, you know, and honestly, people who give first, it's a real indicator of whether or not they're exothermic. And I think when you look at, so we're a multi-sided market product. Like, we're trying to build an ecosystem that gives everybody a lift. And there's something that you learn when you build an ecosystem. As you're building out this product, you have to give way more value before your company can extract that value monetarily. And if you're so focused on extracting the value, you'll just never get the flywheel spinning. And we see this in many places, like whether it's a startup ecosystem, whether it's a effort inside of a company to improve. You have to have this give first mentality, and that requires people who are doing things because they believe it's the right thing and not because it benefits them. So, and that's all about like making sure your company has this resounding why that moves people. Because let's face it, you don't join a startup because you want a job. You're really joining a startup because you want to belong to a cause.
Mm-hmm.
The cause has to be meaningful and move the needle. And if people believe that, then that's why they come. They come because there's way easier ways to earn a living than to join a startup.
Yep. No, I mean, we have very similar conversations when people are, thinking about joining our company. And I would imagine you have that conversation probably before you even meet with them, right? Of just about how, exactly what's on your shirt and how you guys, operate. I would imagine that's right away you guys are having that conversation. I mean, I feel like you could probably see it, right away, but I think just having that very straightforward conversation, before anyone even joins your team to know what they can expect.
It is actually, we use a platform for hiring called Greenhouse, and you are allowed to put in your own custom fields for evaluation, and the 5 cultural principles people are evaluated against those in the interview process.
Yeah. No, it's awesome. I want to definitely get into, building teams and, some of the things that you've done, but, not a lot of people like to tell their story in extreme detail because they're, they don't want it to be all about them. But I think, people see, you're CEO of SVT Robotics. Like, how did you get there? I know that's a very broad question.
Sure.
But talk through kind of, how you got into the industry and how you made it, to this point.
Yeah. So believe it or not, I'm a marine engineer by education. And I was an Army officer out. I came out of when the obvious link is you get a marine engineering degree and you become an Army officer and you drive tanks, right? That's a clear linkage. So when I got out, I actually, by the way, like the Army, my time in the Army was very meaningful and is a big part of my ethos. And, there's this servant leadership mindset that I think embodies people who can inspire loyalty in a selfless way and not just a surface level veneer, right? So, and it really is about being the first one in when something's bad and the last one out when something's good. And just I think the Army did that because in Vietnam there was a lot of, you're out in the jungle with guys with guns, and if people follow leaders that they respect, and not because they have a rank on their shoulder. And that having that, you have to earn the respect of your team, right? So that's my ethos. But I was in the nuclear industry. I was actually a nuclear engineer working for a pretty big company on real big reactor projects. And I got tapped by this Swiss company, headhunted by the Swiss company who was making automation and robotics in warehouses for a company called Walmart, right? You may have heard of it. And so and they needed somebody for one of their teams to lead that had some business background. And I just finished my MBA. And so I stumbled into this industry 20 years ago. I didn't even know there was robotics in warehouses. Like I had no clue. I'd seen it in factories. And during my interview process, they took me to a facility that had a driverless forklift that we had installed in 2004. Right? Think about that.
Yep.
It's like 4 years past Y2K, right? So like,
right.
And I was so blown away. I was like, this is where I have to be. And I haven't looked back since. But, over the course of that, I think I was in the industry about 14 years or so when I decided that I wanted to start something on my own. And a lot of it had to do with just my experiences. And I think I tallied it up. It was $750 million worth of projects, automation projects that I had been involved with, deployed. I was either the project manager, or I designed it, or I commissioned it in the field, like all sorts of different jobs. And when you do that many, you just develop like all the badness that can happen. You collect over time, and it's a lot of scar tissue. And when you do really complex automation, it's a puzzle with jagged edges that is really hard to fit together. And the reality is, over time, you see these patterns emerge, and you realize the hard bit are not what people think is the hard bit. And so it all crystallized for me when we were working on this massive project for an electric car company building this factory assembly line. And we were trying to build this thing on a rapid timeline. And we were trying to get all these systems to work together. And we were actually having to work with our biggest competitors. And what you realize is like, wow, everyone's doing the same archaic stuff. And I had noticed this pattern that we were unable to grow our business fast enough because we could not get enough software engineers to build all the interface logic. So we would have to turn away work, and when you see it in this really massive in the context of a really massive project, it's almost like staring at a black hole and like having this epiphany about the laws of physics. And so at that moment, like I realized that there is no incentive in the industry to make integration easier, because it actually like it works against the interests of companies creating walled gardens. So the only way to do that is to create this like technical Switzerland. And I guess a year after I left that company, it kind of all dawned on me. These things aren't, I think the eureka moment happens in little chunks, but one day it was like, we just got to build the MuleSoft for robotics. And that's how it kicked off. And then we just assembled this ever increasing team of awesome guys. And a lot of people start with trying to make a product. And I think what we did is we collected and curated a team of people who had a really strong understanding of the problem set from the industry. And then we started surrounding ourselves with technologists that were not from the industry, did not have a bias on how it should be built, how to build things with a different mindset. People who joined the company were people from, large search or from real estate applications, right? Like things that you wouldn't think matter, but suddenly they're bringing this different paradigm to technology, and we find ourselves doing things very differently because we have this combination of deep knowledge of the problem statement, deep knowledge of the state of the art, and we mash those two things together, and we built a lead on something that most people didn't even really understand it was a problem. So,
yeah. No, and going right into that, building the team. One of the questions was, how did your time in the Army? What did you learn? And you kind of already touched on that. When I was on your website, a few weeks or months back when we were doing it, I saw you had a VP of People Ops is one of your titles, and under there it says, it's basically a title focused on creating an amazing employee experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I think it's awesome. I think a lot of companies, especially startups, is they're focused on how can we help the customer. It's all about the customer experience. When in this case, it's put on your oxygen mask first, and then you can help everybody else.
Right.
So, I mean, the thought behind that. I mean, do you credit that for all the experiences that you had previous to, where it's like I got to assemble this team first and worry about how we're going to do things versus on the specifics of what we're going to do?
Yeah. So first of all, like I saw the downside of having this super rigid HR, like human resource. So first of all, like human resources, how antiseptic is that, right? It's you're not when you're building a company that is trying to build something that's never been built before. You're looking for people who want to be the first footprints in the snow in Antarctica, right? It's like a different type of person, and these people do not behave the same way. If you have them behave in a rigid structure of a traditional company, it steals their soul, right? So like you've got to think about things differently. And I'll really credit some of this to a guy named Scott Thomas that I work with. When I was working, I did a short stint in the Bay Area before I founded the company. And he was in this startup, one of the first people hired. And it's really unusual. Most companies hire for people ops and talent like way late. And he was like employee number 3. But he wasn't just about admin policies. He was crafting a strategy on how to create and curate a team that were the right puzzle pieces that would work with each other to build the foundation of a leadership team. And then how do you structure and overlay the next step? So he wasn't just worried about compliance, right? It was if it was next level. And I realized, wow, like this, when you think about a startup, especially software, 80% of your cost is payroll. 80%. And so if you do not prioritize people ops, then it's to your detriment. But also you got to think about the lift, right? Like if people ops can yield another 10% efficiency, the effect is massive.
Right.
And so it's a point of leverage. And so making it a priority. And what I'll say is like, it's not a one and done thing. You're constantly having to reinvent this for the stage of your company. And there are times when you stray from the beliefs due to pressures or timelines, and you have to recalibrate. And the key is always try to bring it back to center.
Yep. As fast as possible. Right. I mean, it's the same with most things, right? I mean, you get off track. Most people don't know they're off track until they're not even anywhere near it. It's like the sooner you can identify that, and the more people you have at your company that are truly living those core beliefs, like the easier it is to get back on track, because it's not going to be perfect, right? I mean, it's like you said, there's going to be situations and projects where it's almost easier not to do that, and it's definitely a team effort to get back on.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things, I was looking, recently you guys were awarded the top supply chain project award. And for your SoftBot platform. And one of the things, after just thinking about projects we've had and warehouses we've gone through where, we might see the AGV is sitting under pallet racking because the deployment did not go as planned, right? And you see things like this often.
Right.
A lot of times, especially companies who are new to automation, right? A lot of companies have, the bigger companies like you mentioned, like they have people in-house that understand at least what should happen. They might not understand completely the how, and that's where you come in. But a lot of these companies that are just getting in, I mean, you could have 2, 3, 4, 5 different automation companies, and it's got to speak to their ERP, their WMS, and people don't understand each individual connection. Each is different, and that's where your platform comes in. So I just talk through that, and I just I think a lot of companies and people focus on what's the actual solution,
Sure.
like how, how can we, reduce the downtime? How can we get rid of or allocate this amount of people? And they don't think about the details. And that's where you guys come in.
Yeah, and what I'll say is also most people think of integration, they think about getting projects live. And the value starts after go live. The real value of well done integration, because writing integrations themselves, just writing the code to connect two things, is not actually that. It's not a huge technical challenge. But building a way to do it seamlessly with radical levels of reuse, and to do it in a way where everything is abstracted and you're free of technical debt. And once something is hooked in, anything that is on the platform has the ability to use the data that thing is broadcasting, even if it wasn't intended to do so in the beginning. Right? There could be like just random stuff, like just the dock doors opening up and closing, right? Just being able to view that and understanding what's our productivity rates on the time clock system relative to the dock doors opening and closing. Is there some insight? Like, if you have to hard code all these things, it's impossible, right? So like there's actually a formula. I'm going to butcher it. It's like S times 1 minus 1 plus S divided by, I don't know, whatever. It's not a exponent. But it's a nonlinear equation of the complexity of hooking things together. Hooking two things together is it's not too bad. But the moment you try to take and hook two things together, then three things, at 5, it becomes unmanageable. Like, the numbers get astounding and the cost becomes prohibitive. And usually at 5, you'll see when people request simple changes to the software, at 5, people just start saying no.
Yeah.
Be done. Where timelines are 1 year, right? And most of that year is scratching their head. So like us, I just remember being asked to do something simple for some of our big customers, right? Like some of the biggest retailers. And they ask, oh, we just need this simple change. And you go back and you realize you've got to touch 10 database tables to do it. And you go back and you give them a price tag and a timeline that is just obscene. And you're looking at the ground kicking rocks like, well, this is going to, it's like you're so professionally embarrassed because you realize this simple thing is so difficult to do because of the way it was architected. And so we spent 6 months at the whiteboard just thinking about how to do this. And what we arrived at was just this, taking abstraction and being fanatical about abstracting not just individual technologies from each other, but abstracting the code associated with that interface from the technology stack that you're playing in, right? Abstracting the operating and making sure that the operating system in your app server, right, is abstracted, being able to hook into any BI tool because you don't care. So like, it's not just about abstracting the connection between two things. It's abstracting it to every single technology that the Bay Area is throwing at us, right? Like, and using things like Kubernetes and the like to do that. It takes a lot to really think about this elegantly, but the beauty is most companies think about reuse. They say, well, I will build a connection to this, and I'll put it on the shelf like in a grocery store. Well, just building one thing to one thing, that number is ginormous. There's like 250 robotics companies. But then you start thinking all the different ERP systems. You think about printers, you think about manifesting software and all this stuff, right? Like, if you think about an e-com message that comes through, it's got how many things to pick, how many of each quantity, right? Like, what's the shipping address? What's the method of shipping? all that payload comes out of the order management, yet they're, instead of just publishing that payload once and then these edge systems consuming the thing they need, there's a direct interface to each single one. And they are literally taking that message and chopping it apart and taking only the thing and writing a hard-coded message. And so the moment you want to change one of those out, it's like, it's this cascading effect of, oh, now we got to talk to these guys. So the speed at which companies can change is severely limited. And the crazy thing is, the more integrated you are, the less likely you are able to change your operation.
Mm.
And what you can do is fossilize your company in this, like, it's like you freeze up. You're like this caveman frozen in ice, right? Like,
Yep.
And at some point it's, well, we just can't do it. We can't, it'll be 2 years before we can add this thing. And that's the moment you start thinking in a different way, then you realize that all that can disappear. And then you can do really cool things about data. You can do things about, you can publish stuff to AI engines without having a hard connect to everything. So I don't know, maybe I'm just going super nerd here, but like,
no, I like it. That's why we're talking. I mean, it's like it's a benefit to every player in the game, right? I mean, it's a benefit to the automation company. It's obviously a benefit to the end user. I mean, I was reading one of the case studies where, and it was, I mean, I'm going to oversimplify this, but the deployment of these AGVs, AMRs was, it typically, like you said, it was 6 months.
Yeah.
And all the people involved in the time involved, in that, whereas it's 2 weeks with your platform. I mean, it's just, I'm oversimplifying it, I know, but it's, I think it's just a thing that not everyone, I just don't understand how, I guess, what's the feedback? I know I'm kind of going all over, but what's the feedback you get from, your partners, like the different automation companies? Because I would imagine they're excited when you get involved because it speeds up the process of everything.
Well, their costs go way down, right? And a lot of these companies or product companies, they don't want a huge services arm. And their investors, most definitely, they want their money going into product and not, being a consulting company, right? So at first, there are times when not everybody gets it at first, right? We had a job where a 3PL wanted us. They had gotten this new contract right before peak, and they knew they had to do something because there's no way they're going to get the labor. If they didn't do it, the penalties in the cancellation clause would trigger, right? So they needed to do something. IT was like, we're going to change WMSs. It's already been purchased and bought in 6 months. So you're going to have to wait until after peak season. And then enters us, right? And we say, well, listen, like, we can hook in to this robotics company who was kind of giving us the Heisman, if I'm not lying, right? Like, they were not super interested in it. And then we said, and then we'll build a hook to this WMS, which was like an AS400, like super old school flat file type stuff. Well, we got that done in like 12 weeks. Got into Black Friday, like we went live weeks before Black Friday. Everything went clean. That company suddenly was like, oh, that wasn't so bad. Our life was way easier. Flash forward to this WMS upgrade or swap out. It was a completely different protocol. It was like a REST-based, cloud-based system, so it was very modern. We didn't actually do the big, flip the big switch and plug your ears for world to explode when you switch over to the WMS. We said, listen, the data that we hook into, it gets normalized. And by the time it reaches the robotics company, they don't actually know what WMS they're receiving it from. So we said, turn them both on and just transfer the load over slowly and send 10 orders and siphon 10 orders off. And like, that robot company didn't even know that the upgrade or the swap out happened. They weren't informed. They had no work to do. They weren't impacted at all. And and the go live was super boring. We sent someone to site, but they didn't even leave the hotel room, right? So like, and when you do that stuff, like we had our first, well, international doesn't, if Canada counts, it's different, but like we just went live in Australia with one of our first Asia Pacific project, and we never sent anyone to Australia, and nobody went. It went live. It went live clean. It was a WMS, major WMS version upgrade from like an older version of WMS to the cloud version, and it was nice and boring
That's how
and
they
no
should be,
travel
right?
required. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
You talked about, the use of AI. I think AI gets thrown around a lot by several people, and they don't really understand. They just think AI does everything, right?
yeah,
You just in your case, it's a way to be proactive, um, right, and understand the data and actually be able to analyze some of this data coming in. So, you don't have downtime and you don't have mistakes that could happen months out.
yeah.
Can you kind of just talk through that? Because I do think there might be a confusion from some people on just how AI helps with being proactive.
So there's, I've heard it described as the AI triangle, right? What do you need? You need algorithms, AI algorithms. You need computing power, and you need data. And the quality of the data and the veracity of the data will determine whether or not the results returned are true. And when you're hooking something in that has huge scale, like you could actually create decisions that ruin your business extremely quickly, but the AI engine will be so very confident in its answers, right?
Right.
like so
Right.
so like we have to be very careful, and this concept is called AI hallucination, right? Like it is, and the reality is it is making the best decisions on the data feed it has, and sometimes the data is not, it's not from bad actors, it's that the data is misunderstood because it's not normalized. um if you look at two orders from a WMS, the data payloads are roughly the same, right? It's just that the fields are different, the sequence is different. um but there's also like how like the way the orders are put in. Like if you normalize for all that, then suddenly, no matter how it comes in, it looks the same. You can start drawing conclusions, especially in a 3PL, across multiple WMSs. Now, our focus, we are not an AI company in that we are not building AI engines and the like. Our goal is not to do that. What we want to be is that central nervous system that hooks all the information together so that AI can make really good decisions. Now, even without AI, there's really cool things we can do. So we have this capability, um, because when we write the code, it then renders visually like a process map. And when an error happens, you click on the log instead of just seeing, you know, pick, inventory not successful or whatever, message not
Right.
sent. Instead of just getting like this hard to interpret text string, you click on it and it renders the code visually, and you can just trace all the way through the logic and land in the place where the error is, and tell what system faulted out. And so, for those who've been in the business a while, when a call comes in, the warehouse guys don't say the put away algorithm in the module of the WMS is broken. They say the warehouse stopped. We can't do anything. We
Yep.
don't know what's wrong. And so the phone tree enacts where you call every single technology provider and they all blame each other
Yep.
in this circle for 2 hours until you arrive at who's really got to do the job. And here, it's basically automated root cause analysis where we say instantaneously, that's the person you need to talk to. Don't even bother anyone else. So not only do they recover quicker, all the people who didn't deserve the phone call
Hmm.
didn't get the phone call.
Right.
right? And that's massively beneficial. But, and then we took it to this next level of automating it, right? So like right now, those alerts will come and you can configure who in your organization gets what alert and what error type message down to the resource, down to the plant. And this suddenly means that the people who want the information they want get it in real time. So like I had an event where I was touring a customer site. It was our first adverb deployment, and I really wanted to see it. The spot sort was really cool. And it worked great. And the plant manager was showing us everything. We got to the airport and I pulled up Slack and we have a feed of all the errors. And I just was looking at it. I was like, wait a minute, that thing was down while we were there. And it didn't make sense. Well, what had happened was there was a firewall setting that changed. The error happened, but the bots still had orders. We were there. We could not tell that the software was broken visually. And I've been in, I've walked a wall, so I can smell downtime a mile away, right? Like, what's happening. I didn't notice it. Nobody noticed it. I got to the airport, and what had happened was it was recovered while we were there before the bots ran out of their order queue. So the downtime happened in the digital system, but the physical system didn't notice it because the digital side was fixed before the physical world caught up. And like, how much money is that worth?
Man, I can't think of a better example. I mean, you're on site. I mean, what a cool story. We talked about that the last time, offline. But what better example for you to have, for every future project that you work on?
Absolutely.
No, it's awesome.
That's really the downstream benefit. It's not just about the integration.
Yep.
It's like, what else can you harvest from that integration downstream? And, so we focus a lot of energy on making sure that the downstream impact is there. And we're constantly trying to boost our value prop ahead of customers asking us for it.
Yeah. No, it's awesome. I remember thinking about that after the last time we talked. All right. So I got a couple on the spot questions
Okay.
to wrap it up. But, you've been in the industry, you said, for about 20 years. What's the biggest lesson, mistake, something that you've learned along the way that you could share with someone, who's new, who might be 3, 4, 5 years in? What's the first thing that comes to mind? I mean, it doesn't have to be something super specific with an exact project, right? It could be very high level.
Sure. You warned me this was coming, and I forgot that you're going to ask me this. Hey. So now I'm on the spot.
Hey.
So,
yep, that's
what comes to mind is actually career advice to people who are entering the industry. And when you enter the industry, you enter as a specific job, and most people try to go up through that and promote through that vertical. And somehow I accidentally didn't do that. I went sideways through the company, wasn't focused on promotion really. It was that, hey, this thing's broken. Now that you've done this, you want to go work on this. Well, I'm unqualified. Well, I think you're smart enough to go do it, right? So like, and it's about running into the burning buildings in places that you're willing to just attack and try to bring order to. And if you do that and you go from, an engineering job into project management and then into sales and then into system design, eventually when you have worked all these different components, when you are asked to become an executive, that your decision making is altered because you are actually able to have empathy for all the different departments. And executive level decision making is about balanced view rather than local optimization. And the best executives are the ones that have this wide experience base, so they can have empathy for their peers, right? And so what I would tell people is focus on go sideways, learn as many aspects of the business as you can, because it will make you way more valuable. Maybe you get promoted a little slower than you think you want, but you will accumulate assets into your own personal treasury, and it will be worth it. I guarantee you, and I can attest that it has been worth it to me.
Yeah. I mean, a perfect example of that, right? I mean, you kind of wire yourself to solve problems in so many different areas that how can you not be, an extremely valuable asset to any company. So no, that's not said often, right? Go sideways.
Yeah.
But it makes a lot of sense. Who, in the last 20 years, when I say the word mentor, who comes to mind? And I'm sure you're going to leave some people out. Some people aren't going to be able to sleep at night knowing that you didn't mention them, but who comes to mind first?
I mean, it starts all the way back. I've got some Army mentors that really taught me that leadership is about giving, right? Like, it's a guy named Captain Schmidt. We were on about 6 kilometers from the DMZ in north of Korea, and like just understanding what it really means to take care of your people in a place that they need to be taken care of. Then you get into, I had one of my bosses, Marcus Schmidt, just he allowed me to move through the organization. He was one of these guys that was throwing me into the burning buildings, right? And he's now he's a president over at Boimer. He's such a great guy and really gave me a ton of opportunity and room to grow and a lot of trust, right? Gave me trust, and I always tried to respect and the trust that he gave me. And then there's guys on the venture capital side. I mean, there's some amazing VCs that I've worked with that have taught me this whole world of startups, which is like an entirely different planet, especially for a guy who came from a $5 billion robotics company. You enter into this whole nother world. But, the guys at Dynamo, Santosh Sankar, Julian Cunahan over at Schematic Ventures, these are supply chain specialists. They saw what we had and they knew instantaneously and they invested, but they also taught us the other side of the equation. And then Ted Wang at Cowboy Ventures, he was the venture attorney for Facebook, right? And Dropbox, right? He helped me understand scale. Todd Lewis at Prologis Ventures, right? Like, understanding that how our company should be positioned and the value that we can bring on the long term. I mean, the list is just so long. And what I would say is that, I come my first house was a farmhouse, where my grandfather's house, and both my parents were, we didn't vacation in the Hamptons, right? Like, so the world of finance and trying to convince investment bankers to give you tens of millions of dollars was not exactly dinner time talk for us, right? So and what you realize is that if you have a good idea, but you don't have capital, it doesn't matter. You have to be able to get the capital, and you have to learn that skill. And it was nowhere in my Rolodex, and I had to get it. And it's just, what you do is you find people that see something in you, and then you really listen to them. And I think that is one of the bigger things, is just really listen. And when Ted talks about Mark Zuckerberg, he said that the thing about Mark is that he's not a know-it-all, he's a learn-it-all. Like, the guy can just consume information and become an expert so darn quick, and that's his superpower, right? So once you stop learning, that's where the trail ends, in my opinion. Yeah. So constantly learn.
I love it. So what's next for you and your team? What are you excited about? What are you excited about the most?
We've got some amazing accounts that we couldn't have dreamed of getting 5 years ago, when we were starting out. And what that really means is that people understand the problem. Gartner has recognized us as a thing that is unique, right? And now we're doing, multi-site rollouts with customers, and that just is super exciting. And so like we just see this momentum building, but also we see this, our goal was to build this ecosystem that coalesces not just for the benefit of the end customers, but also for the benefit of integrators and product companies and 3PLs, right? Because that's really what it does is it defrictions all this work that has to be done every single time. All the Word documents that have to be written to talk about how we're going to send messages, all that goes away. And suddenly people are seeing that the outcomes they can create are the things that they wanted to do that everyone says is impossible, they can suddenly start doing. And we're having the opportunity to do that on a very big stage with some very big companies. And the trust they put in us, you know, our exothermic nature is to make sure we make good on the trust they give to us. And so I'm super excited by that. It, of course, in startup world, whenever you solve one problem, you have to worry about the next. And so, you know, as you have these types of successes, it creates, you know, you got to start thinking about what's the next thing in an organization that you have to prepare for. You know, you don't want to be a victim of success, right? So,
Right.
So yeah, that's exciting, and the fact that people understand the problem, because it took about 3 years trying to convince people that this was actually a problem that needed to be solved. I don't really have to do that much anymore.
No, that's nice. And it's, you got everyone, you know, essentially selling it for you, right? Pushing you, you know, you and your team in front of everybody.
That's helpful. And that's the momentum. And, you know, so if you think about, there's this guy named Bernard Silver that nobody knows who he is, right? Like he's just this obscure guy. But he was he was the co-inventor of the barcode. And if you think about this guy, you know, he doesn't play golf or play basketball or football, so we don't know his name. But that creation digitized the planet. Think about that. Like the barcode is the way we digitize physical objects, and no one knows who he is. And you know what? Like that's the level of impact I hope we can create. I don't know that it will, like, because to me that is one of the most underrated. It's like on the magnitude of Gutenberg's printing press, in my opinion, and it enabled the digital revolution. And if we can be even a fraction of that, I would be a happy guy.
I mean, that's a great target to have in your sights. And I mean, with what you guys have done already in a very short amount of time, I would not bet against you. So I appreciate you coming on. I know you're a busy guy. Appreciate your time and letting me learn from you. And I look forward to sharing with this, you know, with everybody that'll listen. So thanks again for coming on.
Awesome, Jake. It was great. I love and thanks for the great questions.